Welcome again to RDWorks Learning Lab. Today we're going to be down in the workshop. You've loaded your program in now, but you want to cut something. What are you going to cut? Well, some materials you can cut, lots of materials will cut, some materials you shouldn't cut because they produce dangerous fumes, or they will produce a horrible sticky residue inside your machine, and they may well even produce fumes which will damage the raceways in your machine. So there's lots of information out there on the internet about cutting these materials. I can't go into it here because it's far too complicated, but things like printed circuit board, stay away from it. This floor tile, which has got PVC in it, anything with vinyl or PVC, don't go anywhere near it. It produces deadly fumes and you don't want to cut it. Polycarbonate. Acrylic is good. Hardboard and MDF, well, yeah, produce lots of fumes, and it will produce smelly fumes that will last a long while inside your machine. You may or may not want to cut those. Yeah, it cuts reasonably well. PETG. Go and do your own research. So basically you need to be sure that you know what you're cutting, because some things, or they may look the same but they're not the same, and I'm now going to give you a simple example of that. Now we have here on the floor 5 pieces of clear thin material. They're all different materials, so how do we tell them apart? Some are better for laser cutting than others. Well, this one here I know is polycarbonate. Yeah, you can cut it. It's not advisable to cut anything over a thin film. They use this stuff for bus shelters and riot shields, and you can see why. It's extremely strong and durable. Now this material here is a slightly thicker material, and it's something called a copolyester. It's commonly known as PETG. And it's the sort of thing that's used in fizzy pop bottles. It can soften nice and easily, and it can be blow moulded into bottles. As you can see, that again is pretty tough, and it has to be if it's going to be used in fizzy pop bottles. Now this next piece of material here is again PETG, but it's thinner. Exactly the same properties. It doesn't smash, it doesn't crack. Now what about this material here? The fact that smashes so easily tells me it is cast acrylic. That's a nice safe material to cut. And finally, if I tap it gently, you'll see that it does mark, but then it breaks quite easily. So this is still acrylic, but it's manufactured in a different way. The first one was cast acrylic. This one is extruded acrylic. It's slightly tougher and it's got more flex to it. Now that might seem a fairly crude test, but it tells you very quickly what materials you're working with. Now there are a few good websites around, this one in particular, which gives a good succinct summary of the sorts of things that you need to be careful of with materials. For example, there's a heading here which says never cut these materials, and then you've got another section here which says cutting. Cutting but with cautions, and etching again with cautions. So this website is well worth a visit, and you can study it at length. Right, let's have a little bit of a look at the machine itself and see how we can now run this test. I've now got a piece of clear acrylic here, and I'm going to probably run this program twice. So what I'm going to do is, with my knife, I'm going to put a score across there, and I'm going to remove the plastic film from one side, and we'll use that for the first test. Right, although we've got our file in memory, it's not exactly ready to run yet. So if we press file again, we shall find that it's probably sitting here, and it's now available to us here. If we press enter again, it now appears on here. We've got our 2 layer parameters shown here. If we press enter again, we bring the cursor across to these two layer parameters where we can change, we can choose, for example, between either of these two layers to edit the layer. So we press enter to edit a layer, and here the layer is available for us to enter. Now we've got minimum power 1, minimum power 2. We know that 2 is not available to us, so we're only going to mess around with minimum power 1 and maximum power 1. And to get to these, you don't use the down arrows, you use the ZU key. So we're going to move from, at the moment, if you take a look up here, we've got the layer colour active, and if we change that, we can go to black or red. So now we can come down with the ZU key to the first option, and then as we press the we then get the opportunity to change these if we wish, and we can do that with the arrow keys, change the numbers, and then we can just select every one of these windows with the ZU key, and when we've finished we just press enter, setup success, enter, done, escape. So we now do file again, and here's our file that we're going to run. Now one thing I like to do before I start is to do what they call a track. So we'll come down to track, and I'll press enter in a minute, but I'll show you what will happen on the machine. Now bear in mind I've got nothing on, no laser, nothing at all. All I've got is the machine power on at the moment. So we can press enter. So that's a big waste of material. We can either move the material to suit where the laser is moving, and that may not always be possible, but let's stay with that simple option at this point in time. Track, enter again. And it does stop at the top left hand corner, so we can in fact move that down to about there, and we're now ready to run our program, except the fact we haven't got the machine switched on. So let's go through that routine of first of all switching on the water pump, lots of air going through the laser. We'll wait for the air bubbles to clear. And there we go, we can hear that they're virtually cleared now. We'll now turn the laser on. I shall now turn the extractor fan on. And on my machine here, I've got control of the air pressure that flows through the head here, the air assist. So I'm going to turn the air assist on, because it's controlled by a pressure gauge and it's fed from my compressor, which you may hear turn on in the background. Now I've got something like about maybe half a psi of pressure in there. So we're all ready to run now. We will just come down to the menu again, and we'll move this up to run, and then I shall just press enter. Right, here we go, enter. I'm going to press pause for a second. Now the reason I've moved the camera is I want you to look just here. Now there's this like a white halo down there. Now that's the acrylic. When the laser beam hits the acrylic, it boils off like steam. And this is like a condensate that's sitting down the side here. It's a powdery condensate. I will now turn off the air assist. I'll now turn off the air assist. So I'll press the pause start button. Now you see we're producing a lot more fumes. but you'll notice that we're not producing Now we can see here two things. First of all, when I turned the air off, all of a sudden it changed its characteristic. Look, it's only a powdery residue on the surface, but it recondenses on the surface and makes a bit of a mess. So it's a trade-off. And the other thing that we found is that we haven't got enough power here to cut through these items. So we need to go and modify the power or decrease the speed, which is probably the sensible thing to do. Then we'll come into the menu here and we'll press enter, and the one that we want to change is the cut speed, which is the black one. So we press enter, and at the moment we've got that running at 15 millimeters a second. I think we'll drop that down, so we need to come down with ZU, and we need to reduce that speed to maybe we'll take it down to 10. So we'll move this left hand arrow key, and it's gone under the 1. We'll move it with the right hand arrow key, and it's gone under the 5. Now we can reduce the 5 to 10. There we go. And now we can just press enter. We can now just press enter, I think, and we should have done all the modifications. We don't need to change anything else. Setup success. Okay, so we're now ready to file. Whoops. Run. I shall just press the enter button in a second when I get you back onto the machine. And I think this time what we'll do, we'll turn this round and we'll have a go at cutting through the protective film. And I will turn the air on again, the air assist, because I don't want to damage my lens. I want air passing through the nozzle. So it still hasn't dropped out because we haven't got enough power there. All this protective film on the surface here is absorbing more of the energy than I expected. So let's take the film off of the front and the back and run it again. The one thing I didn't check was the focus, and it does look as though the focus is out, and that may well be the cause of the problem. There we go, that's the correct focus now. A good reason why you should set your focus correctly. And there's our end result. We've got a lovely crystal clear edge. The surface is covered in this debris, which will just wash off, to be honest. But there's our first test piece with a few mistakes that I've made. Hopefully you won't step into the same problems.